Good morning, everybody. It is 10:03, so why don't we get started? I see people continue to join, but in interest of everyone's time and to be efficient, let's get started this morning with the second meeting of our Technology and Innovation Collaborative. Thank you all for being part of this important Pathways to Career Opportunities effort. We look forward to continuing to work with you on this important effort to align education with the changing skill needs of employers. Since we last met a month ago, we had our first meeting of our industry leadership team in innovation and technology, and you'll hear an update on that very vibrant discussion that we had with industry leaders from across the state. You'll hear about that later. Our centers of workforce innovation, 4 of them in this area, have been working very, very hard to develop their action plans for their work. So we are very deeply involved in this exciting effort and very much appreciate the strong partnership between New Jersey's community colleges and NJBIA, New Jersey Business and Industry Association. And this morning we are joined by Michelle Sikirka. Michelle, thank you for your partnership and for your entire incredible team's work to support this effort. And we appreciate that the business community has been leaning in and partnering in new ways with us. So good morning, good to see you.
Morning. Thanks so much, Aaron. It really is my pleasure to spend some time with you this morning and hearing your input in this extremely important and critical area, career pathways. It was really interesting what we heard from the business community last week. Frankly, not a lot of super surprise, but some things that were a little more aha moments. And now marrying up to the academic and provider side is exactly how we continue to move this forward. I know how precious everyone's time is, so thank you for your commitment to this process. This is a journey, but I feel this time the stars have aligned beautifully, and I do believe we're going to have incredible outcomes from this for in-demand jobs right here in the state of New Jersey. So Aaron, with that, thank you for the great partnership, and back to you.
Great. Thank you, Michelle, and look forward to this ongoing, very important work that we're doing together. And there will be incredible ROI for the state and for the business community, and we're working together in new ways. So thank you. So we have a full agenda today, but we are going to start with a discussion about credentials, and we are joined by 2 national experts in the topic of credentials. One is Michelle Van Noy, who's Director and Associate Research Professor at Rutgers University, and she is the Director of the Education and Employment Research Center. Michelle has been a long friend of community colleges in New Jersey and around the country. And a leading thinker on credentials and credentials of value. And we're also joined by Jennifer Freeman, who's a Senior Director at Jobs for the Future. Jennifer and her team have been supporting our Center for Student Success for many years. Jennifer, good to see you. Thank you for all of your incredible work that you're doing at Jobs for the Future on the topic of credentials. And so we're really happy to have Michelle and Jennifer here to share some of their thoughts. Well, we talk a lot in this initiative about stackable credentials, about the important role that credentials can play. And we know that there's been a proliferation of credentials, and this is an industry area where we've seen that probably more than any other place. And so as we launch this effort and we commit to build stackable credential pathways, we need to do it thoughtfully, carefully, with industry input and guided by the best thinking. And so could not think of 2 better people to start off this discussion today about credentials. So we're going to give each of them a chance to talk about their perspective on credentials, their advice for all of us as we embark on this work. And then we'll join in a conversation on a number of key credential related topics. Hope that you'll all put questions in the chat that we can contemplate, and very much look forward to a vibrant discussion to kick off today's work. So Michelle, why don't we start with you? You're here in New Jersey. Well, you've got home field advantage here as a New Jerseyan. Jennifer, we appreciate you coming from out of state on Zoom and bringing a national perspective.
It was a long journey.
Long journey. Amazing things that we can do in this crazy pandemic. But Michelle, let me give you the floor and share some of your thoughts and your research and your insights about credentials, credentials of value, sub-degree credentials, and all of the amazing work that you've done around the country. Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Erin. And thank you for having me join this panel today and be part of these discussions. I think the work that's happening here in New Jersey is super exciting, and I'm really, really happy to have the opportunity to share some of the work that we've been doing at our center with everyone, and be part of the discussion and hear about the exciting work that everyone is undertaking here. It's really, really important. As you know, I've spent time studying non-degree credentials and quality, and then also I've spent a fair amount of time thinking also about community college non-credit programs. So I'll share just a couple of thoughts, I think, on both of those areas, which I think will help us frame this discussion and think about, what some of the things are we might want to do. I recently just finished a sort of a national scan of what community colleges are doing around non-credit, and there's a lot of work that's happening. And maybe just I can share briefly some of those high-level findings and point you to a brief that's on our ERC website that can help just put in context of what's happening with non-credit. We see a lot of interest and emphasis on developing links between degree programs and non-credit programs. So trying to think about those pathways into to credit programs. We see a real need for student supports to help translate those students from non-credit to credit, and a lot of shifting in terms of organizational structures. So there's no one way that colleges are setting up their organizations to promote those non-credit to credit transitions, but there's a lot of thinking around that. And I think the one other really big high-level finding I can share is really thinking about the question of quality. And in the area of non-credit, what does that mean? And thinking about sort of sub-baccalaureate credentials, what does it mean to think about quality? And how do we approach that? And I think some of the voices that we heard really are pointing to the importance of documenting labor market need and having those credentials be based in labor market need. And there's a lot of questions around LMI and how you assess labor market information. And I can point you to another project that we are doing that's looking at how colleges are assessing labor market information. Some of you might have gotten a survey from us about LMI. If you're interested, I can share more on that. But I think that's a foundational question, though, and a universal theme we heard was the importance of documenting labor market need to that underlies the credentials. But another theme that came up within the non-credit programs was the involvement of faculty, and thinking about involving credit faculty in non-credit program development as a way to engage and build those pathways. And that's not always easy, but that was a strategy that came up among several colleges. And then another big theme is sort of alignment with external standards and the use of industry certifications and other kinds of external standards that help to bolster the value of credentials and certificate programs. So those are some trends in non-credit. I want to share one other point, and maybe if I can share a slide, can I do that? I just have a little bit of a visual, which I think might help us in terms of thinking about what the elements of quality are. So just as background, our center developed a quality framework for thinking about non-degree credentials. And this is, just sort of a high level view of what quality is, but I hope it may be helpful in guiding some thinking. So when we think about non-degree credentials and credential quality, there's a couple of elements to consider. Broadly speaking, there's the design of the credential. Is it a quality design? And there's a lot of elements that can fall under that. Is the content relevant, which goes to the labor market information and other pieces that we talk about? Are the instructional processes relevant? Are the assessments good? Is the credential itself stackable and portable? Is it transparent? And is it accessible and affordable? So there's a lot of elements to quality design. And we think if there's a quality design, it should lead to outcomes of value. We all care about competencies. Are people skilled coming out of the credential? Are there employment outcomes that are of value, educational outcomes open to students from getting the credential? And what are social outcomes, wider sort of societal outcomes? And are employers getting outcomes of value that they care about? So there's a lot of things to consider, which I know makes this very complicated and difficult to assess. But if we want to really understand holistically what non-degree credential quality or credential quality even more broadly is, we want to consider all of these factors. One other piece I just want to draw your attention to that sort of underlies all of this is there's a set of processes that actually take a quality credential, one that's designed with quality, and help translate it to value. So I call these market processes, but we have to recognize that just because you have designed a high quality credential doesn't automatically mean it's going to lead to an outcome of value. There have to be some processes in place. Could be transparency initiatives. It could be building awareness with your employer community. It could be external validation, a whole host of processes that help make that credential be known and take on outcomes of value. So I will leave there. I don't want to spend the whole time talking. I know we want to have discussion, but I hope that this framework can provide some value in thinking about what we mean when we talk about quality. There's a lot of definitions of quality out there, and I think some of them tend to focus on some smaller elements within the broader framework. They're all good and all valid, but I think that there's just important to sort of keep the big picture in mind in terms of where you're trying to think about improving quality and how. So those are just some thoughts, and I look forward to continuing our discussion, and feel free to reach out to me with any questions about anything I've shared or anything else I can help follow up with.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for kicking us off. And we're so fortunate to have the Education and Employment Research Center at Rutgers here in our own backyard, and have you here. And look forward to a lot of further partnership and work with you, and look forward to sharing your reports with all the folks on this meeting and in our broader Pathways network. And so Jennifer, let me turn it to you as key part of Jobs for the Future, a national organization that's really devoted to economic mobility and advancement. You and your colleagues have been thinking about these issues. So let me turn to you for some opening remarks, and how do you think about credentials in this rapidly changing world that we're finding ourselves in?
Thanks. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Erin, for having me, and Michelle, good to see you. We think a lot about short-term credentials and credentials in general, both on sort of the non-credit, how they involve non-credit programming at community colleges, how they involve credit-bearing programs in community colleges. Bottom line about credentials, we have been talking a lot lately about short-term credentials because meaning anything sort of non-degree credentials, sub-baccalaureate, associate degree credentials, because there's been increasing demand from both employers and students themselves for opportunities to gain some skills and enter the labor market more quickly. And that has really been on the rise, that has especially been heightened during the pandemic, but it was happening before that. And so it's really the other thing that's happened during the pandemic, as we well know, is that the disparities in access and opportunity in post-secondary programming have really grown, and that people who had been marginalized previously, people in low-income communities, people in low-wage jobs, have even sort of have not been seeking colleges as they had before. So so for all kinds of reasons like that, it's also really critical to figure out credentials. And I love, Michelle, your quality framework. We too have similar quality frameworks, and really look at the same, have really the same kind of criteria for quality. They have to align with the labor market. You have to understand that employers in the area recognize the credentials and there's jobs attached to them. They have to lead to jobs that pay a family sustaining wage, and they have to lead to advancement. What we don't want, even though we are very much promoting shorter term credentials and are in favor of Pell grants, financial aid supporting shorter term credentials, they really need to lead to advancement. We do not want to be promoting credentials that are static, that leave people in kind of the same place they were economically before they entered the program. What I actually want to share a framework in the chat that I don't have a slide, but I have a couple things to share with folks. We have a framework for I'm looking at how to get this in the chat right now. We have a framework called that is written up in a report called "When is a Job Just a Job and When Can It Launch a Career?" And it looks at how do you analyze the labor market to ensure that when you're building a pathway, it includes credentials that are of a higher quality and that will lead people somewhere. And it talks about lifetime and springboard jobs that you want to be aiming for versus static jobs, which are credentials that really would lead, which are static jobs where you don't want credentials to go. You want to be able to be building a pathway that leads to lifetime or springboard jobs. So that might be an interesting piece for folks to look at. So bottom line for us, it is about quality, but it is also, as we view it, really an equity issue that community colleges and their workforce partners build stackability and build shorter term credentials leading to higher ones, because those kinds of credentials are more accessible to a broader range of the population. And we have, there's more to say about articulations between credit and non-credit, and more to get, more deeply into quality, but I know that we want to have a discussion. So
yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Jennifer. And thanks for putting that link in the chat. We'll make sure that the resources from JFF and from Michelle's center get distributed to everybody, not just on this call, but on our other collaboratives as well, because I think everybody could get tremendous value from both of your organizations' work. So I want to start with this broad question. Both of you touched on it, this issue of quality. We talk here in this initiative about industry valued credentials. And so I just want to get your insights on, thinking about how we might tackle that issue. We've got our industry leadership teams. We've got a strong partnership with BIA. Some ideas or thoughts about, building on the quality framework that both of you have been working on. How do we really assess where the things are industry valued? And how do we know? Particularly in this industry, innovation technology, where there's been just a massive proliferation of credentials. Thoughts that either of you have for the issues of quality and industry valued in particular. Who wants to start with that broad question?
Well, I'll start it briefly, and Michelle, you could jump in. How do you know? You ask employers. There's a lot of, you have access to labor market data. We do a lot of work with not just traditional labor market sources, but real-time labor market data like Burning Glass and MC sources that look at job postings. I mean, you sort of see what employers are asking for, and then validate it locally with local employers. So that is one thing. We also, and Michelle probably sees this in her research with non-credit programs, programs that it kind of comes down to the instructional piece. There are a lot of programming. There's a lot of programs that actually have faculty who are straight from industry, who work in the industry, who have very up to the minute kind of understanding of what workforce needs are. Ensuring that people get some workforce experience, work-based learning is kind of an essential part of in a framework that we're developing around post-secondary designs, guided career pathways. Work-based learning is really an essential part of it. So making sure that people get some hands-on training so that they're kind of equipped, understand what they're going to be experiencing in the workforce before they get there. Those are a couple initial thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. Michelle.
I can just add a couple of things. I completely agree with everything Jennifer said. Those are great points, and I think I think one kind of broad underlying issue is this kind of issue of relationship building with employers that is important for colleges that are awarding credentials, is to gain trust in the institution, gain trust in what colleges are doing, and some of that comes from those personal relationships and having internships and doing that kind of labor market assessment and labor market engagement. So it's that building of trust and knowledge that this credential actually is what the employer is seeking, and also the trust that the institution can deliver what the employer is seeking. So I think those are really essential observations that to some extent there is sort of a rational process of gaining information, but there's also kind of a more relational process of building trust and knowledge about the credential. And I think the other thing to add too is that a lot of this is about labor market assessment, 100%, understanding what the needs of the labor market is. really important, but there's also maybe a sort of also trying to inform employers of what credentials mean. So, there's a lot of confusion in the credential landscape. We know that there's like almost 1 million credentials out in the world right now. And part of the problem is people just can't keep up with all this information, which is why the relationship building is important, which is why getting large employers and lots of employers to sort of sign on and say, yes, we use this credential. Yes, this is valuable, because you need that sort of endorsement. That's what I was talking about with the market process. You need some kind of endorsement or validation sometimes to really get the credential to stand out and be valued and recognized. You need these shorthands for people to kind of come to understand that they're valuable to use. It's that almost like a marketing piece, like how do you get a good credential to be known? And so there's a lot of relational pieces and a lot of communication work that kind of happens in this process. And that's all the hard work that you all are engaged in, is like, you have a great credential, you have some employers that agree that it's great. How do you get all employers to know that? That's the question. And it's a communications effort. It's a process. It's not like it just happens. It's a process.
Yeah.
Well, and that's where the process that you're embarked in, or the councils that you're building in New Jersey, are really critical, because it's way too much for any one college to talk to, individual employers, all employers in the area and in the industry. That's what's so great about the council, because your councils can do that kind of communicating with employers that Michelle's talking about.
Yeah,
the one thing I would add is that we talked about data at the front end, like what does the labor market data tell you? It's also so critical that you are looking at the data of students who have been in programs and really understand where they land in the labor market. The proof is in the pudding, sort of, right? Like, if people have X credential, did they actually get jobs? What were those jobs? Are their wages higher than they were when they entered, before they even entered? So those data systems that do cross-reference the community college system data with employment data is really critical.
Yeah, thank you both for all those perspectives, and obviously data and partnerships and communication become really important to this work. Jennifer, you talked about equity, and Michelle, you touched on some of these issues. This initiative is centered and led by community colleges, but you'll see in the chat, we've got incredible partners in four-year institutions, community-based organizations from the private sector. And we know that people will get and should get credential opportunity, obviously earn credentials, not just in community colleges, but in other places, community-based organizations, at vocational technical high schools. A lot of those are our partners. So can you all speak to a little bit about how credentials, and maybe a focus on credentials, can help us address building those broader pathway partnerships that might actually address issues of access and equity? This idea that this has got to be a broad partnership. And have you seen, through your research and thinking, good models or thinking that might help guide us to think very differently about how we knit all of our institutions together in new ways that open up more opportunities? So a broad question about these broader partnerships that we're trying to build that I think are critical, but guidance from you all would be really helpful to think about how we tackle that.
Well, one thought I have, I think, actually kind of flows right out of the question about credentialing and how do we know what's a quality credential, in the sense that one mechanism that I've seen, I think that's particularly helpful in bridging those gaps across institutions, is having kind of a common currency, which is often an industry recognized certification. Sort of having those industry certifications can help translate the value of the learning across different institutions. So they can help in PLA processes, they can help in transfer processes. I think that can be an important currency in thinking about building those relationships. And they are so crucial, because I think that's true in terms of, the outcomes we care about. Really, we want employment, but we want further education as well. And so that's, figuring out those processes are really important. But that's the one I think that speaks most strongly, I think, when we think about this from a credentialing perspective, is finding those credentials of value from the industry.
Right, and not saying that 1 million credentials have value, but identifying some core credentials that we might focus on in pathways, in ways that we could build those relationships between community-based organizations that may be providing training, and ultimately four-year colleges that we hope will accept those credentials for credit for a student who may want to go from a community college to a four-year institution. Jennifer, any thoughts you have
exactly
on that?
Well, what you just described is exactly the model that we've seen work really well time and time again. We do a lot of work with colleges and their community-based partners. We're actually involved right now in a project called Boost, funded by the Kresge Foundation, where in several cities there are partnerships between community-based organizations and colleges where the individual student first earns a credential at the community-based organization. And then that credential is recognized, articulates to a program at the college. So they get credit for what they did at the CBO level, because it's an industry recognized certification in some cases, not all, but because it's recognized, there is, but I like what Michelle said about the currency, it's sort of a known currency. So it's easier if it is an industry recognized certification, it's easy for colleges to kind of see what was learned and to recognize that learning through credit. And it's also, it definitely is an equity strategy because it reaches people who wouldn't necessarily walk through the doors of a college. They don't think they're college material. They don't see themselves that way. They don't feel like they can sort of stop life and go off to college. So when there is, when a initial credential is offered when the first step of a pathway, let's say, is offered at a community-based organization that they're comfortable with, that is right in their community, it is a way to bring people in who are who have otherwise been marginalized from the system. And there are lots of great examples around the country where those kind of partnerships have been really amazing and provided entree.
Yeah, we hope to learn from those. The Boost program is an important model that we hope to replicate here with our partnerships. And thank you for bringing all of that up. Both of you mentioned prior learning assessments, and I know there's a comment about that in the chat. We recognize that people will be potentially earning credentials from a whole variety of providers, maybe even through their employers, and then coming to community college or four-year colleges and hoping to continue their journey. Could you all talk very briefly about what you're seeing and thinking about prior learning assessments? We're doing some work on that topic here in New Jersey, and thinking that credentials, again, can be a currency to help us move the prior learning assessment work forward. Any thoughts on PLA and how we might think differently about credit for prior learning?
I'll just mention something really quickly to you, Erin, that will be helpful for you or provide a helpful model. We right now are working with the Michigan Student Success Center. In Michigan, they're building a system, a statewide system to help community colleges to help the process of credit for prior learning, can help community colleges determine what credit to offer for particular credentials. The issue with credit for prior learning is that colleges want to be the final decision makers about for what do they offer credit. But there are these statewide systems that can be developed, not to tell them what to do, but to offer guidance, to simplify the process, so that all colleges aren't having to sort of assess the learning outcomes, et cetera, for standard credentials or standard certifications on their own, that there's some guidance that's that helps them determine what the credits are. So there's ways to speed up the process, and it really is, it's so central. I mean, all efforts to bring adults back into college or into college for the first time, like credit for prior learning is sort of the central process. I just saw this morning too that LaGuardia Community College is establishing a center for credit for prior learning. I just saw that today in a piece in the Lumina newsletter that you all might want to look at. It was there was a lot of great reports in that article.
That's excellent. And on this past Monday night, our 18 colleges gathered through our council and passed a resolution to commit to work together on PLA and to start with this notion of industry valued credentials. So we are starting that journey. We'd love to learn from Michigan and from the other examples that you mentioned. And thanks for that inspiration. Michelle, you mentioned PLA. I think you were the first person to mention PLA. So you've been thinking about this topic. a lot. So anything you want to add to the
Yeah, no,
PLA
I think
discussion?
it's wonderful to hear about the efforts with New Jersey's colleges. I will say, I mean, I think there's there was some work with the some of the TACT grants earlier on around PLA, and so I know that some colleges in New Jersey have been thinking about that in certain sectors. So that's really, it's wonderful to hear that it's really continuing on and really marshaling up at a new level. It sounds like with these initiatives. I think there's a lot of potential there, and as Jennifer said, it really is crucial for making colleges accessible for adult learners. So I think everything Jennifer said, I completely agree with and echo, and I'm very excited to hear about the work that everyone's taking on now with that in New Jersey. That's exciting. Look
Great,
forward to
thanks.
happen. Yeah.
Thanks, Michelle. And I know both of you will be inspirations and help as we think that very complicated topic forward through. But I think that the PLA piece can also help us build those strong relationships with other institutions, CBOs and high schools. So we've got about 8 more minutes for this segment of the program, and I want to encourage anyone to put questions in the chat for Jennifer or Michelle. I know people are putting in some resources, so encourage. I know, Jennifer, I think your colleague is putting in some great resources for others to take a look at, and we'll all be really excited to take a look at that. But let me ask kind of a broad question as people might put questions in the chat. We've covered a lot of ground. This has been an incredibly helpful conversation, I think, grounding our work in some really best practice thinking. But as we embark on this effort, are there some innovative ideas that we should be thinking about? What are some kind of big kind of final thoughts that both of you might have on what else we should be thinking about? What's next? How do we make sure that we're seizing this opportunity of this initiative to really make sure New Jersey's at the very cutting edge? What do you see the future look like? What are some innovative thoughts that we might want to think about, or questions that you have that you're wrestling with that could be helpful to us? Who wants to start with that big, broad kind of final bucket of questions?
I have one observation, I think, from the scan of non-credit programs that we did nationally, which is that I think there's a lot of different kinds of models for delivery that are emerging and different competitors in the market that I think are shifting how community colleges are thinking about how they provide shorter term training. So we have online providers, we have some of the big tech firms kind of getting into this space. We have, just differences in accessibility, which I think are leading colleges to think about different approaches and possibly more collaborative approaches to working together, in a sense that, if I think that the sentiment I hear in some places is that if community colleges are going to really continue to compete, and community colleges have a real value add, which is this ability to connect to other pathways. But if community colleges are going to be able to compete, they need to kind of think about how to work together and marshal resources and think about this broader context of short-term training providers that are out there. So I think that's all to say that I think this effort is really well timed and well positioned to help New Jersey's colleges think creatively together about how to succeed and sort of really help enhance and really help New Jerseyans thrive in the sort of market that we're in. So I guess it's maybe not so much a specific recommendation, but an observation about the well-timedness of this effort. But I think for the need for collaboration and thinking regionally and thinking about how colleges can work together, because this environment is bigger than just the community colleges. We got a lot of players in this market right now. So that's what I would say.
That's a really great point, Michelle. Yeah. We recognize that, which is why we have so many great partners outside of the community college world and led by the business community. Jennifer.
Well, where my head went when you asked that question was part of what Michelle said when Michelle talked about delivery, like flexible delivery. It's not enough. So there, I was going to mention, and I'm sure you've looked at them. There are programs like Virginia's Fast Forward program. There are programs where states incentivize colleges to build these kind of programs. So, and you have some of that. Those are really good models to look at. But so you get people in the door, you pay them to come, you help with the financial issues, provide holistic student supports we haven't really talked about, but that is really essential, kind of a personalized, tailored support. And then, but also, again, for adults, for people who are already working, for people balancing, work and family responsibilities, et cetera, more flexible, more accessible delivery models like modularized programs. Competency-based education is really key and really the next frontier here. It's about skills, not time. About like make sure that you give people a way to build skills and not just expect certain amounts of time in the classroom. So the more that, so I guess that's when you said kind of what's next, competency-based education is a big part of what's next. And modularized, hybrid, just those kinds of delivery models that are more accessible. Because as Michelle said, that is what your competitors are doing. That's what short-term training folks in the non-community college space are doing. And adults are being attracted to them.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going with that, Jennifer. Thanks for fleshing. I mean, that is exactly the point, that it is, there's a lot of different modalities there, and flexibility is key. Yep.
No, we thank you both for joining us this morning and really kicking off this session today. You raised some incredibly important issues, gave us some answers, but gave us a lot to think about. And we look forward to continuing to work with both of you. Jennifer, thank you for your team's support for our Center for Student Success. Look forward to continuing that important work. And Michelle, thank you for connecting with us and being part of this effort, and for your leadership here in the Garden State. It's always good to see both of you, and great conversation. So thank you both. And please, everyone online, join me in a virtual thank you to Michelle and Jennifer, and we'll be in touch with all of you going forward. So, wow, that was an incredible discussion. And
Thanks,
I hope
Aaron.
Really, inspire all of us to think that this is an opportunity to really work together and think differently, to be led by the needs of industry, but to think about the national models and these national trends. We've got some answers here in New Jersey, but when we really look at the national landscape, we can really steal and borrow some great ideas. So thank you both for raising the bar on our thinking this morning. So now I want to transition to our next section of the program and introduce our Director of the Technology Innovation Sector Work, Vida Shamsuddin. Vida is doing an incredible job leading this work with her colleague, John Miller, who's also on the line. And Vida, good to see you, and the floor is yours. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Aaron. And thank you, Jennifer and Michelle, though that was just such insightful information that you shared. As Aaron said, my name is Vida Shamsuddin, and I am the Director for the Technology and Innovation sector, and John Miller is my Program Manager for the Technology and Innovation sector, but also for the Manufacturing and Supply Chain. So you'll get to see him on another day as well. With that, next on our program, we've heard from you about the initiatives with the pathways and what's so important about that work and what we need to consider. Now we have Rebecca Chisholm, who's going to talk about the importance of industry value credentials from an industry perspective. Rebecca is the senior leader for the Network Academy for Cisco for the North Americas. But one thing that I want to kind of share about Rebecca as she comes forward, which would be very interesting with her presentation, is that she describes herself as a connector, as a translator, and a pioneer for new approaches. And so, Rebecca, I know that you were not expecting that introduction, but I wanted to lead with that. Also wanted to apologize for the slight difficulty that you had in joining us this morning. And so with that, Rebecca, I'm going to turn the floor over to you so you can share your presentation with us. And thank you again.
Can you all hear me okay?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and this is such a critical time, I think, in the world and in our nation in terms of providing skills. And I'll just start off by saying, in the past, everybody had to have a college degree to get into most technical jobs, right? And even at Cisco, if you didn't have a college degree, you kind of didn't even bother to apply. We had some without degrees, but you had to have a ton of experience. And frankly, you had to know somebody, right? And what we've learned now is that, yes, there are some jobs that do need a degree. I mean, our lawyers, our chief financial officer, some of our, software developers do need those degrees and even advanced degrees. But we've taken a hard look, and many of the tech companies, Apple, IBM, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, as well as large employers, Citibank, Wells Fargo, and others, have taken a look at their jobs, and they're saying, we do need some degrees, but there are also a lot of jobs that can be filled by people who have competency. I heard competency-based education mentioned, and that have certifications, right? And so one of the things, and I know Angel from CompTIA has posted in the room as well, industry certifications, industry recognized credentials are really important. And I think a way that people can demonstrate value to employers in a shorter time frame than the 4-year degree, and gain entry-level skills and get into the workforce. And I'll share a short story and then I'll go into my slides, Vita. But I was attended the Cyber Patriot Finals here in DC this weekend, and that's a national competition sponsored by the Air Force Association around cybersecurity and competing. And it started out with 5,028 teams spread across every state, Canada, Puerto Rico, and it narrowed down to 28 teams, right? And as I was talking to some of the students, we were talking about degrees, and I saw a couple of students kind of, their face got a little bit cloudy when we started talking about degrees. And I said, you know, you don't always have to have a 4-year degree to get started in this field. And they said, really? And I said, yeah, you may not know this, but there are a lot of employers that if you can demonstrate with an industry recognized credential and you can demonstrate with evidence-based skills, you can get into these companies, and then they have tuition reimbursement programs. So you can pursue your 4-year degree while you're employed. And many of us understand that, right? But I think we sometimes forget that many high school students don't understand that. And I'll tell you, when I said that, it was like the clouds parted and they said, really? I said, yeah. I said, Cisco, where I work, I said, 2 people on my team are completing their degrees now as part of Cisco's tuition program. So I just wanted to start off with that a bit. If we could go to the next slide. And I don't know if I can advance it. Okay, so we talked about certifications. And Cisco itself has CCNA, CyberOps, DevNet, a number of industry recognized credentials that employers look for to hire people. And as I mentioned, there's CompTIA, there are others that are out there, right? Amazon has some certs, and employers use those to say this person has demonstrated skills and competencies and passed a certification exam. It's not just a case of they passed a course, but they actually sat for an exam and they've passed it. And so they're meeting a minimum bar. And one of the things that Cisco has done, Network Academy has been around for 24 years. We're in 180 countries. We've trained 15 million students. But with COVID, we realized that the modality of teaching has changed and that there are students that, for whatever reason, can't attend a school right now. They don't have transportation. They don't have money. They don't have time. They're working. So we launched something called Skills for All, which is direct to learner model. So now we offer both a school-based program, which some of the New Jersey community colleges take advantage of and use. And then we've launched Skills for All, which is direct to learner. And it's not either or, it's and. So some students will start off in the direct to learner because they can actually take the course on their mobile phone. They don't even have to have a laptop. And one of the certifications is one that we've done with Certiport, and it is an entry-level cybersecurity cert. And we know that cyber is critical. I was watching CNN this morning, and Joe Biden and others are warning about a coming cyber attack from Russia, given what's going on in the world. K through 12 schools are one of the biggest hacking targets for people because they're virgin social security numbers that haven't been used. And so the need for cybersecurity employees is vastly outstripping the supply. And I was talking to Manpower, a big employment agency, the other day, and they said, every employer wants the unicorn. And I said, what do you mean by that? And they said they want somebody with 3 to 5 years experience and certifications. And while we would all like to hire that, there just aren't enough of those people. And so what we've done is embarked upon this path to create an entry-level IT specialist cybersecurity certification that's direct to learners that people can do on their own and then can feed into more advanced learning. Next slide, please. And one thing that we know about a lot of students today is that I call them breadcrumbs. They need reinforcement and encouragement along the way, right? Because sometimes it's hard to sit and look 2 years ahead and say, oh, in 2 years, I'll get this certification. It's a little bit hard, especially for non-traditional learners. So we offer these course badges that you'll see there on the left, right? So as students complete courses, they can get these badges that they can put on their profile. They can put in resumes when they're, looking for internships or apprenticeships or jobs. And so they get badges along the way. So that reinforces that they're making progress toward their goal. Then they can get a pathway badge around cybersecurity. And once they've completed this course, then they can sit for this exam with Certiport, and they get this IT specialist cybersecurity certification, which again, speaks to employers and says that I've completed this pathway, I've learned the content, I've sat for an exam, and I've passed it. So next slide, please. So we're really trying to be mindful of the need for students to be rewarded along the way. And what we're talking about here is hybrid learning, right? And it's creating a pipeline from Skills for All, which is our direct to learner pathway that I mentioned, into the more formal networking academy that is already instantiated in some of the New Jersey institutions that are attending today. And thank you for that. So if you look at the legend, you'll see here that there are digital badges, there are certifications, and then there's job preparedness. And so on the left-hand side is the direct to learner. And you can see it starts with introduction to cybersecurity, lets people try it and say, hey, do I like this? Can I do this? Is this interesting to me? And then once they progress from that, they go to networking essentials. Because I always say, without the network, there is no cloud, there is no mobile phone, there is nothing if there's no network upon which all this technology rides. And without network, there's no cyber, right? And so we feel that networking essentials is really important. Once they complete that and they have a basic foundation of what is this thing called a network and how does it work, they can then enroll in these courses around endpoint security, network defense, and cyber threat management. And the reason we broke these up into small courses is, again, to make them attainable, make them consumable in bite-sized chunks. And various people might be interested in only taking 1 or 2 of them and maybe aren't interested in the pathway. So once they've gone through Skills for All and kind of gotten this comfort level and gotten some basic skills under them, many of them, we hope, will decide to transition into your universities, into your community colleges, and then study for Cyber Ops Associate, which is a higher level certification, or get a cloud security certification where we've partnered with Cloud Security Alliance. So you can see that some of these lead to certifications, some of them lead to badges, and then many of them really focus around job preparedness and having evidenced job mastery of skills that they can employ on their job. For many years prior to COVID, Network Academy really focused on in-person, instructor-led, hands-on courses. And one of the reasons that we've done that is there are a lot of students that get out of school full of book learning, as my dad used to call it, or theory, but you put them in front of a router or a switch, and they're not even sure like how they plug the cable in. That's not good. So we really tried to focus on whether it's actual physical devices or it's simulation, being able to do it through videos so that when a student walks into an employer, whether it's the state of New Jersey, Bergen County school system, whether it's Wells Fargo, Citibank, or Merck, that when they go into that NOC, when they go into that SOC, when they go into that network room, they are competent at getting started in their job. So that's a little bit about that. Next slide. And so let's see, I've lost my train of thought here. I apologize for that. So this is our pathway on hybrid learning from Skills to All and Network Academy. As I said, there are a number of community colleges that offer a variety of these courses. They may not offer all of them. They may offer CCNA, which is our networking certification. They may offer Cyber Ops Associate, or they may offer a brand new one called DevNet, which is really around programming and developer and secure DevOps and incorporates Python and Linux and other skills. So this is an example of a pathway. And I heard mention when I came into the session on credit for prior learning. And I wanted to highlight a couple of examples where we're doing that today. One of them is in Washington State between the library system and Bellevue College, where the library systems are offering some courses direct to students. And then when the students show that they've completed these courses and they can show that they've passed them, Bellevue College is actually granting them some prior learning credit to give them some advancement in their courses. And then Toronto Public Library has a very long-standing program where they also have learning circles and are providing education around technology. And then those courses can be articulated and moved into higher ed cases. And it's all about sort of shortening that time to get a student employed, because Cisco Networking Academy is really focused on skills to jobs. It's great to train people, but we really want to help them find that entry level, I call it the escalator onto the technology job, where they can get their first start in a company and then move up from there based on their own skills, their interest, support and mentoring from the company. So I think Vita, the next slide.
Yes, and thank you, Rebecca, because the next slide takes us up to our innovative partners.
That's
but
what I
before
thought.
I do that, I want to absolutely thank you for your comments this morning. And it's amazing, as we have had our panel discussion with Jennifer and Michelle, and you coming on from an industry perspective, just to see the synergies that you both are, all three of you, quite frankly, are talking about as relates to these modularized hybrid approaches in people's lives to really help them, navigate their careers. When Jennifer talked about accessibility and not the length of time, but quite frankly, the skills that you are receiving, and then for you to come on and talk specifically about the skills for all. I know that you're going to be getting some questions from our centers as we look at on-ramping from different perspectives to encourage that career advancement along those pathways. So thank you so much for that. And with that, we are going to move, and let me just say this, because we do have time constraints. If there are any questions for Rebecca, she's put her email address in the chat. Please feel free to open that up and copy your email and send your questions. Or quite frankly, if you put your questions in the chat box, we at the New Jersey Pathways will make sure that we get all of those questions answered and get your questions answered. So next, we have the Innovative Pathway Partnership collaborative partners. And most of you guys know, if you've joined us before, that this is where we have some of our ecosystem partners join us and talk about their innovative partnerships that they have. And today we have the Cisco Dream Team. So Anna, and I just have to tell you and Pastor Davis, as you join us, that when I saw the Cisco Dream Team, since we're absolutely in the middle of March Madness, I was like, okay, then clearly we've got the slam dunk coming. So with that, we're going to get ready. Let me introduce you all. I have Anna Pagiano, get that right, Anna Cotton. I got that one right. Who is Vice President of Workforce Development at Rowan College of Burlington County, joining us today, as well as Pastor Keith Davis, who is the director of the Camden Dream Center, which is a training school for the Cisco Networking Academy, and it's a support center as well. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are very interested in hearing about your partnership and your collaboration, particularly as we at the New Jersey Pathways begin to see how we can bring all of our ecosystem education partners together to really have a very fluid and transparent pathway, and what those on-ramping and off-ramping look like as these pathways are created, and absolutely bringing in our community-based organizations as well as other education partners, because we know that one team works stronger together. And so Anna, with that, as part of the Cisco Dream Team, I am going to say the floor is yours.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I do want to also acknowledge my colleague, Professor Paul Warner, who is the coordinator of our information technology and cybersecurity programs. And he's fading in and out of the screen. I'll pass the video over to him had some connection issues in his office, so was able to join by coming in person.
Okay, thank you so much, Anna. And Paul, I am so sorry. I didn't know, I couldn't see you in the screen, so I didn't want to introduce you, but welcome, Paul, and thank you for all the work you've been doing so far. So as Paul ebbs in and out.
I'm here.
Great.
So I'll get us started. I'm really here to introduce Paul and Pastor Keith Davis, really, but wanted to also just give a little bit of background about the partnership. This is who we are. If we can just go right to the next slide, that would be great. We really started this relationship about 5 years ago when we were looking at ways to really develop cybersecurity and computer technology training at the non-credit pathway. We sought to collaborate with the right partner, really focusing on developing a program that would be aligned eventually across the institution, involving a number of business and community partners, with the goal of being modularized, as we've been talking about, accessible, available in person, online, affordable for students, and resulting in an industry credential. And so that relationship really began through the partnership with the Camden Dream Center, where when we started, we were essentially under their umbrella as a satellite training partner as part of the networking academy, the Cisco Networking Academy that they sponsor. If we can transition to the next slide, I'll just hit a couple of the highlights, and then I'll hand it over to Paul. As you can see, it began as just trying to develop one program for our Cisco certification approach, and then that's evolved over the years now to expand the networking technician and certified network analyst courses, as well as beyond into other computer and cybersecurity training programs. We've now also we continue to sponsor and support and train our instructors in partnership with the Cisco Networking Academy at the Camden Dream Center. But we've also now integrated these credentials into a number of our cybersecurity and computer technology associate's degree programs. And so just overall, in terms of students who've completed the credentials through the certification program, we've partnered with a number of our local businesses to place our students place over 100 students into jobs, and so we've shared some of the statistics of how we've gotten to where we are today and how we're truly integrated across our learning pathways. So I'll hand it over to Paul to talk a little bit, and we're going to fix the mic. I'll fix the camera rather, so that he's more visible. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. I'm Paul Warner. Thank you guys for having me here. Hello, Pastor Keith Davis. Let me first say that the Camden Dream Center is basically has been and continues to be a pivotal role in what we do here at RCDC. We started with the Cisco Academy, and from its infancy, Pastor Keith Davis and his team has guided us and molded us through into what we are today. The first program that we started here at RCDC was Cisco. We did the CCNA training. And Pastor Davis, he helped provided, I came on board as an instructor on the WDI side. So I started teaching on workforce development side. And Pastor Davis was very instrumental. The Camden Dream Center was very instrumental in because there was a challenge in getting certified academy instructors to teach the courses. What he did was he helped provide us and guided us through with the training, provided a training for us. He enabled us to actually have right now 3 certified Cisco Academy instructors. So whenever we teach Cisco courses now, we do have certified instructors that teach those courses. And if you look on the screen, you'll see the numbers speak for themselves, right? And this was over, all these numbers you're looking at here is over a 2-year period of time that you're looking at. He helped us in terms of acquiring equipment. We consulted with him. A lot of our students that actually graduated or actually went through the program are very satisfied with what we offer. What we do here, we focus on student satisfaction, which is part of what Camden Dream Center is about. We focus on the hands-on skills for our students, which is what the Camden Dream Center is about, because Pastor Davis has a whole room with Cisco routers and switches and firewalls and all that stuff that's built there. So we kind of model what we do after what he has been doing at the Dream Center. And we have been very successful here doing it. Of course, COVID came around and that kind of put a halt on a lot of what we were doing. But our program here is what it is because of Camden Dream Center. And from that infancy that we started there, we were motivated to go ahead and become a CompTIA Academy. So we were seeing the success in one, so we actually expanded to the CompTIA Academy and also worked on getting the Microsoft Academy. And now we're exploring other options, and it all started with the Camden Dream Center as our father figure in helping us mold and groom our WDI side, and now it's actually transferred into the credit side. So we're doing the same thing now on the credit side. So thanks to Pastor Keith Davis and the Camden Dream Center for helping us to get to where we are today.
Next slide, please, as we hand off.
Hello, everyone. I'm so grateful for those extremely, incredibly powerful and kind words that Professor Paul shared. 5 years in the making, and it's such a rewarding thing to look back and to see the outcomes. Just seed sown, and as a result, here we have a bumper crop. So congratulations. I want to thank Aaron and also for Carolyn Stargill, thanking Vida for this extraordinary opportunity. I'm super thrilled to be here. I want to thank Rebecca for her presentation, giving a high-level overview of the Cisco Networking Academy program, because that enables me to just take this deeper dive into the Dream Center, our culture, and some of our direct outcomes that contributed to now the Dream Center having a global impact around the world. Let me say this, Professor Paul, we have one of your graduates coming in for a job interview at the Dream Center on Friday. You do, so that it doesn't get any better than that.
Thank you.
During COVID, as a former federal contractor, understanding federal procurement and nomenclature when it comes to contracting, the Dream Center initiated an application to become a sponsorer of a USDOL registered apprenticeship program. We were successfully awarded that status. So currently, the Dream Center has 3 occupations that we sponsor as part of that program. We also have plans to add more sponsored programs in the future as workforce requirements dictate. For instance, there are emerging technologies that even Rebecca alluded to that have been introduced, a set of new occupations such as network automation engineer, DevSecOps engineer, and even cloud automation engineer, just to name a few. Current programs that we sponsor are network support technician. This is the CCNA program that traditionally Cisco has offered over the years. We now support in a registered apprenticeship program, the cybersecurity support technician and help desk support technician. I've left a link in the chat that you could click to learn more about those programs. Essentially, what we're talking about is a registered apprenticeship programs that they are uniquely able to meet the changing demands of a rapidly emerging digital dependent workforce. They are a wonderful tool to train career seekers, particularly considering IT as a profession, especially for non-traditional learners. that have historically been underrepresented in IT. Specifically, we're talking about Black and brown people in America. We're talking about women, veterans, and more importantly, even the disabled. So we specifically and intentionally advocate as a social enterprise. We have highly skilled, competent, capable instructors. We have colleagues degreed up to the PhD level who have spent their lifetime in this industry. I've spent personally 4 decades as a technologist and as an owner of a systems integration company for 30 years. And so what we do is advocate on behalf of hiring from this population individuals that come into this and onboard into the IT industry. By definition, an apprentice is someone who is hired on to an on-the-job training work experience program by an employer. It is a earn while they learn program. Next slide, please. I don't want to get into the minutia of what this actually is, because I think many of us know, but at a high level, an apprenticeship program is an employer-driven training model that prepares critical talent pipeline to sustain, to grow, and to build the U.S. workforce, and to reach into areas where learners and career seekers want to enter into a particular field but lack the experience. What the employer does essentially is provide on-the-job training, whereas your RTI, related technical instruction institutions like the Cisco Networking Academy, pretty much like Burlington County College, they provide all of the in-class theory training and a lot of hands-on as well, but it still isn't real world. You know, I follow sports. I'm an advocate sportsman, and a player can practice all they want during practice, and I believe in practice. But until you get into the game, you're not at the same pace. And so what we understand that is critically essential, put these learners in a work-based learning environment so they actually learn under a mentor, having the protection of someone who's done this to pour into them and develop those skills that they've learned in the classroom. I think it is critically important that we do that. And so when you look at an apprenticeship program tied to the Cisco Networking Academy or any of these technology learning experiences, what the apprenticeship program does is put that learner in a real world situation so that now the assessment just isn't what they've learned in class, but how they perform in a real world situation. And lastly, we're looking at the learner, yes, earning the digital badges, earning the credentials, and the framework that we just discussed today is tremendously effective, well thought out. The co-chair on the NIST for NICE, and this is all we do is have thought leaders around the country think about, you know, what these credentials should look like. And I appreciate my relationship with Cisco because it's through being an Academy Support Center with Cisco that I even sit on these boards. So it's important, it's critically important. But in a U.S. Department of Labor apprenticeship program, I'll finally make this comment and then I'll stop. In addition to the Cisco certification, the U.S. DOL will also issue a certification, and that's very important so that hopefully by the time a kid graduates from high school and or their first year or two at community college, they have stackable credentials that they can demonstrate the skills that they've learned. And so again, I thank you for this opportunity to share.
Well, thank you all. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Pastor Davis, for sharing with us your innovative partnership, because at the end of the day, it absolutely benefits students. And we continue to see that synergy, that theme about accessibility that makes these opportunities more available for everyone. And we've heard that theme throughout all of our speakers today, and it continues with your presentation. So thank you, and thank you for the work that you continue to do. Next slide, please.
Vita, if I can actually
Absolutely.
speak to one of the questions that's in the chat, just very briefly. One
Okay.
thing that we didn't mention is really expanding what we're doing to make sure that we have pathways at the high school level. So we're very excited to have received some grant support through the Office of the Secretary of Higher Education to be able to provide need-based assistance for our students in 12th grade or recent graduates from, the ideal is that it's integrated at the 12th grade level for folks to be able to get some computer science, CompTIA in this case, credential training in partnership with our area schools, and then have credit that they can then apply toward continuing education. So there's a lot of work, and I think Pastor Davis can speak more to the specific pathways at the high school level that he's also, continuing to expand and work to move forward.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, our meat and potatoes is working. The Dream Center has a strong STEM program that is extremely powerful from K to 8, so that when kids really graduate from middle school, they already know they're writing in Python. In fact, Camden County College just brought one of our high school students on campus because she's that good. She started with us when she was 8 years old. So we go K to 8 and then 9 to career. But let me say this, as a result of COVID, something new has occurred with high schools. They don't have the teachers. So now they're contracting with us, proctoring the class, and our instructors are coming in with WebEx and actually teaching the content. And this is relatively new in the last quarter. So now we have some funding that has just come in so that we're going to our academies and finding out who's lacking competent teachers, and we're bringing in instructors so that we can build the pipeline, use dual enrollment and articulation agreements with our community college so that the pathway is without, the barriers that occur. Usually things get sticky along the way. It's a pipeline that flows seamlessly. So that's a great point. And one of the innovative areas I want you to think about, and that is we're helping high schools who are struggling right now with teachers. And if we don't do that, we're going to have an issue. So I want to speak to that. I'm so glad that question by the gentleman or the lady from JP Morgan Chase.
Thank you so much, Pastor David. And we would like to just stay on the subject all day, but Catherine is probably going to go, okay, Vita, next. So thank you so much, Anna. Thank you for that. And what we're going to hear more as I talk about some of the industry trends that our industry leadership team has shared with us, touches on some of those specific points, Anna, that was raised by Jennifer about support services as for these pathways to really increase their success, as well as Pastor Davis talking about that need to reach back past, quite frankly, high school as it relates to STEM. So with that, I segue to our next section, which is insights on current industry trends. And what we did at the New Jersey Pathways, or what was done with NJBIA and the New Jersey Pathways, was really to convene industry leaders for their quarterly team. And as you look for technology and innovation, I will not read through the list, but these are all the partners, the industry partners that Michelle and Jennifer talked about that are very important to the success of our industry pathways, because it is that collaboration and exchange of information that really does validate to say that these are jobs that are waiting for these students when they finish these pathways on and off ramps. So with that, we had great information from them, some of which I will be sharing with you now, but we really just wanted to highlight that our partners are onboarding. We will bring on more partners, industry partners, because we know that they are absolutely a part of the success of this initiative. Next slide, please. So technology and innovation in New Jersey, we wanted to share with you information that they've shared with us and talk about what those trends are. Trends, opportunities, challenges, skills, and credentials. What have we found? Obviously, robust job growth projected in professional and technical services. Data analytics, artificial intelligence, and other new technologies are being rapidly adopted. And we know that we see that in manufacturing as well as in other high health tech related fields, which we talked about in our collaborative yesterday. Automation, machine learning, and quantum computing are broadening in demand for technology workers. One thing that came out of our industry leadership team discussion was the whole aspect of connecting these, we see cybersecurity. You've heard Rebecca talking about that schools are like, vulnerable targets. We know that there's so many vulnerable targets across all sectors. So when we look at whether it's data analytics or artificial intelligence, or quite frankly, cybersecurity, we know that these technologies are growing and they're more in demand. And that was also shared by industry leadership team. As we talk about opportunities, okay, my chat box is up on my screen. As we talk about opportunities, we know that many occupations in the sector have caused us to work remotely and allow businesses to grow a global workforce. That has been the beauty, even in the pandemic. There's been an increased demand for cybersecurity technologies. You heard Rebecca talk about it. And also in our chat, Angel Pinheiro, who is the Vice President of Academics for CompTIA, shared with us that he's done webinars where there are 1,000 to 3,000 attendees for IT, but specifically for cybersecurity, he's had over 9,000 people in one webinar on cybersecurity. So we know that, all of technology and innovation, these fields, they're very hot, but in particular cybersecurity, because of where we are in our society right now. We talked about the increased demand. Young workers and students increasingly view computer and coding skills as important as other areas. Now, I'm going to say that again, because we think we really want to highlight this. Young workers and students increasingly view computer and coding skills as more important than other areas. One of our industry leadership team members shared that they thought that it's not that coding is viewed as important, is that coding is actually a second language. And if people are able to and willing to learn a new language, i.e. coding, then it also opens up accessibility in demographics, whether it's an older population of those underserved communities, because it is a new language that allows them opportunity. Challenges. New Jersey's technology sector lacks gender and racial diversity. That's a statistic in New Jersey, but quite frankly, we know that's a national statistic, particularly in the area of technology. That is one of the challenges. Stimulating early interest in math and science. We heard Pastor Davis talk about the work that the Camden Dream Center is doing. And we know that more than ever now, STEM doesn't start in high school, it starts in middle school and it starts in elementary. And by opening up these STEM opportunities early on to quite frankly, all students, it increases their aptitude and an understanding of those opportunities that wait for them as they move through high school and into community college and maybe ultimately into a four-year degree. Constantly changing software and technologies challenge workers to maintain current and relevant credentials. We know that in technology, 1 month, it could be a year in another sector. In technology, it might be a day, it might be a week, because technology and innovation technology is driven by innovation, and that happens in nanoseconds. Skills and credentials. Ongoing training, diversity, equity, and inclusion to address a diversifying workforce and state population. We talked about that. We heard that throughout these presentations today, that's very important, and that these skills and these credentials absolutely open accessibility to underserved populations and to everyone. That's very important. Math and science skills, in addition to computer skills and programming and software specific credentials. Again, we talked about the math and science needs and how that might be addressed. And lastly, increasing importance of essential skills, flexibility, problem solving, critical thinking. We've heard from our industry leaders that this is very important. We've talked about this even in some of the center work, that these very essential skills underlie and support the success of the pathways, because students need these even as they engage in these higher learning kinds of activities, particularly the technical skills associated with credentials. I wanted to move quickly through that. And the one thing that I really wanted to also share, to just tell you that we all are in the same place. An article recently came out that the Maryland governor, Governor Hogan, announced that state government in Maryland will no longer require applicants for state jobs to have a 4-year degree. And they have done this to boost the recruitment in several areas, but particularly in technology, where they have over 8,000 vacancies. And they know that they have to be fluid and flexible to address this need in these job vacancies in technology. And they are instead looking at relevant experience, training, and community college education. And so with that, that is the information, that's the update on technology and innovation from our industry leaders, what the trends are. Catherine, I will turn it over to you. I tried to move it along.
We certainly want to be respectful of everyone's time. I'm just going to discuss briefly exactly what the community college partners are doing inside the Centers of Workforce Innovation. They've spent January, February, and now March creating work plans, identifying education partners to invite into the centers. The centers, for obvious reasons, are much smaller than these collaborative, all-inclusive statewide groups, because the folks in the centers, the partners in the centers, are going to be doing some work. And in fact, they are going to be enhancing existing degree programs using a pathway model to ensure that their degree programs in these community colleges are connected to high school curriculum, to 4-year colleges and university curriculums, and more important, to adult workers who are taking courses, workforce development, upskill courses, maybe not for credit, linking those courses to degree programs by translating those previously non-degree credit courses to for credit. We want to make sure that there are on-ramps and off-ramps all along a student or adult worker's pathway and journey to a credential or degree in New Jersey, as we work hard to facilitate all residents receiving a degree or credential. Everyone knows that the state's credential policy is 65 by 25. We want 65% of the residents in New Jersey to attain a credential degree by 2025. And we think that we have to adjust the education ecosystem to ensure that there are no dead ends. There is no training or education that anyone takes in New Jersey that is not somehow linked to an industry value credential or credit toward an academic degree. And so we really just wanted to show you what a comprehensive cross-education sector pathway looks like. This is the work that will be done in the Centers of Workforce Innovation for those 10 occupation areas in the 4 industry sectors of focus of this initiative. We want to make sure that the community college degree programs, or they will be connecting maybe some previously unconnected degree programs at community colleges to high schools through dual enrollment agreements, and when possible, including industry valued credentials like the Cisco, the CompTIA, the Microsoft credentials that will allow high school students to put those credentials on their resume and be employable right away. That is important to us. And of course, at every opportunity, enhancing the education experience with experiential learning opportunities. That's part of our partnership with the New Jersey Business and Industry Association. We're leaning heavily on them to get commitments from employers to participate in this way. Certainly at the community college level, we're working in the centers to ensure that there are more industry valued credentials that are the Cisco, CompTIA, Microsoft, Salesforce, Google, all of those embedded in degree programs. We know that our student population are more likely to work and learn. And so if they are able to obtain these industry value credentials while matriculating, toward a degree, an associate's degree from a community college, they can put that industry valued credential on their resume and instantly be employable. So that's very important. We are also within the centers ensuring that there are more 1+1 transfer agreements. There's no need, we're all global now, especially because of the pandemic and the use of telemeeting opportunities like Zoom and Microsoft Teams and others. And training is happening that way as well. And so less need for every single community college to specialize in particular degree programs. So a local resident or student may take their general education courses at their local community college, but because of a 1+1 transfer agreement, can actually take their major courses at a different community college. And we want to make sure that that experience for community colleges throughout the state is fluid. We will have and do have already some 4-year colleges and universities participating in the centers. And that is in part to maximize transferability of community college credits to all of the 4-year colleges and universities in New Jersey. We are all aware of the Lampet Law, which requires all community college credits to be transferable to public, state colleges and universities. However, because though there is not as much connection or curriculum development that is shared, that is collaborative between community colleges and 4-year colleges and universities, many times students, our students, the community college students, experience that they are not, 4-year colleges do not accept all of their credits for their major. And so there's no real advantage, right, to go attending a 2-year college if they have to start over and repeating those major courses, those, focused area major courses. Also within the center, all of the partners will be working to identify and maybe even standardize prior learning assessment solutions. So again, there's no dead ends, so that students who maybe take non-credit workforce development courses will now receive credit for them because those credits are translated to community college credits, and working adults non-credit courses and prior work experience will amount to community college credit. We want to ensure that anyone interested in a community college degree or just moving along the pathway toward a credential or degree actually get credit for the education and training that they've experienced. And we want to connect all of this to the community-based training organizations like the Camden Dream Center, as well as unions and private career schools. We are working with all of them to also translate their courses to community college credits. So this is very ambitious work. It is not going to happen overnight, but this is the focus of the work that is happening in the Centers of Workforce Innovation. I feel like I ran through that, but we certainly want to appreciate and be respectful of your time. Thank you all for attending today's event. We are moving to a different scheduling of the collaborative meetings because so many of you all attend all 4 of them, and we feel like we're taking up the morning of an entire week from you. And so now going forward, beginning April 6th with the Manufacturing and Supply Chain Management Collaborative Meeting, there will be 1 collaborative meeting per week. And so we have those dates listed here. Everyone will receive blast email invitations. Certainly, if you are already signed up to participate in our Pathways initiative, I will just hold this slide open. You can scan your phone over the QR code, and the web page on our website where you can sign up to get updates and invitations and other materials will appear. So again, thank you all. Have a great week. And we hope to see you next month for the next Technology and Innovation Collaborative meeting. Bye-bye, everyone.